So we'll start with some meditation. Just a short meditation to get us settled and collected. So get comfortable. The Buddha said that if you want to really use mindfulness of in and out breathing for immersion, then begin with the idea of letting go. So in order to really let go, we need to be comfortable in the position we have. So noticing if your body is relatively straight, the spine is straight, but the body is also relaxed and comfortable. Check in on your legs and your arms and hands and see if you can let go of any tension that you might be feeling. And bring a sense of kindness and warmth to the mind. Gentleness towards your body and your mind. And then take this as a time of letting go and relaxing, but also being alert, present, with a kind of delightful energy. That brings up gladness, gratitude, peace. It's nice to know that we're doing this together. And even if someone's listening to this by themselves, can remember that somewhere somebody's meditating. Somebody's doing this same process, turning inwards with kindness, with gentleness, with a certain level of enthusiasm, wishing the best for ourselves and others. With the intention to let go. But how do we let go? Sometimes when there's tightness in our muscles, maybe there's tension in your shoulders, it can help to really tighten it up much more, just raising those shoulders and squeezing them and then letting them relax. Do that for any part of the body that's tight, and when it's not working, to just invite it to let go and tighten it up just for a short time and then And how do we do it with the mind? Probably the most useful tool is mindfulness. That when we're turning inwards and getting quiet, maybe putting our attention on our breathing, allowing that to take us in. But our mindfulness is established. So we're observing the breath. And we have a certain agility of the mind. So when thoughts arise, we can observe those thoughts. And maybe they're a kind of thought that's easy to just notice and let go. But sometimes the thoughts are kind of sticky or they catch us and get carried away with them. And as soon as we notice that, stepping back and observing what is the nature of this thought, this way of thinking. What's helpful in letting it go? Maybe it's noticing what the thought is really about or what feeling it brings up. And then the way of seeing it with wisdom. This thought is connected with this kind of feeling. You can notice if this feeling is leading to what's wholesome or unwholesome, what brings more peace or more agitation. If it leads to more peace, then it's good. Maybe it's an inspiring thought about the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, or someone in your spiritual life that you look up to, someone you find inspiring. But oftentimes, of course, it's not that kind of thought. It's a thought that leads to anxiety or some other form of stress, or really is leading to excitement, like some kind of fantasy or some kind of fear. And we really want to let that go. So depending upon the thought, we may have to do some deeper work to understand what's there. Or maybe it's a thought that we've looked at already many times, this kind of concept or view or opinion or memory. And we can really just say, no, I'm not going to give this energy. I don't want this to be repeated again and again. I'm finished. I can turn my mind back to my breath, back to my mantra if I'm using a mantra, back to observing from that bit of distance where we're not caught up in the feelings, we're not caught up in the thoughts. And there's a sigh of relief. Today I want to talk about opening the Dhamma eye. Usually in the suttas, that phrase, Dhamma Chakku, is translated something like the immaculate vision of the Dhamma arises. And it means stream entry. But I'm not actually going to talk about stream entry as such. I listened to a talk on YouTube by Ajahn Kalyano. Ajahn Kalyano is the abbot of a monastery near Melbourne, Australia. And I visited there for a month, almost 20 years ago now. It was a very profound experience for me. And recently I've been listening to some of Ajahn Kalyano's talks, and I really like them. And this one that I heard was entitled Opening the Dhamma Eye. And, as I said, usually the expectation is, talking about stream entry, but that's not how he approached it. And I really appreciated this. It was much more from the place of how do we train the Dhamma eye? How do we train our inner eye? He said that Ajahn Chah would say that our external eyes are very well trained. We can see all kinds of things. We perceive all kinds of things. But our inner eye is not well trained. It has a lot of delusion and, of course, greed and hatred and all kinds of distortions of perception. But that inner eye is seeing from Dhamma, seeing from the place of Dhamma. So this is something we need to train. We can train ourselves to see everything from that perspective of Dhamma. And what that means, of course, is that we look at the situation that we're in, any aspect of it, and we apply something like these three characteristics. This too is impermanent. There's stress or suffering here in this, and it's not me or mine. Another way to think about seeing with the Dhamma eye is that the sense of self completely falls away. We're not looking at things from that position. So the real training of the Dhamma eye happens mostly in meditation, but it happens also the rest of the time when we're not meditating. So in meditation, and we're, clearing away so much of the distraction, whether we're sitting or walking, whatever posture we have, we're clearing away so much of the distraction that it gives us the opportunity to really observe the thoughts that arise, the feelings that arise. And then we want to look at them, we want to observe them with the Dhamma eye. This feeling, this is impermanent, or knowing what is behind it. And like the many kinds of things that can arise for any of us anytime, regardless of our circumstance. There can be fear there can be anger, there can be resentment, there can be jealousy. And we notice there can be desire. And then the beauty of doing a lot of meditation practice is that we come to points where the desire, the aversion, and the confusion fall away. And we get maybe just glimpses in the beginning of times where the mind doesn't want anything or want to get rid of anything. Maybe it's filled with one of the beautiful qualities like metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, kindness, compassion, joy about what's good, equanimity. Or maybe it's really settled on a meditation object. But this happens, it's not consistent, is it? This is why, regardless of what's happening during meditation, it's practice. We don't have to think, oh, that was a bad meditation because it didn't have those settled moments, but more coming from the place of, oh, I'm learning about my mind. I'm learning about my mind and my body. This collection of experiences that are coming through that I can learn from, and I can ask myself, okay, what is it like to see this with Dhamma, see this through the Dhamma eye, not through the eyes of craving and clinging, or that kind of sense of self. So there's all kinds of examples that we can bring up about, how this works. Like, maybe someone says something and it brings up some old feeling, something that happened in the past to us. And then we notice that, and then look at why, if this is an uncomfortable feeling, if it's painful, why is it painful? Why does this bother me? Sometimes I have played the kind of almost think of it as like a game with myself of like, okay, that I can imagine, or I know maybe someone who would have the same experience and it wouldn't bother them. So obviously it's not just a given that this particular situation is a problem or would bother just anyone. So then looking what's caught up in it for me that causes this to be a triggering experience, for example. So I've been reading the Vinaya lately. And this is part of what I set out to do during this 3 months. And there are stories in it about the Buddha's cousin Devadatta, who you may know was pretty much went the wrong way in his holy life. But it didn't start out that way. He got ordained along with Ananda and Anuruddha, King Bhadia, Bahu, and Kimbala, who also, if you read the suttas, if you study the suttas, some of these names are familiar. And so there were 6 of these Sakyan men who wanted to go forth with the Buddha in the very early days of the Buddha's ministry. And they all left along with their barber, someone who serves them. And they brought, according to the Vinaya, they had this whole kind of army with them, like these troops. And they went out together, as they often did. So this is kind of like, these are kind of the rulers. One of them was the king of the Sakyans at the time, Bhadia. And they went out with all these men, and then they sent the troops back home. So this was their plan of how to leave without being stopped. And so there, the 6 of them were with their barber Upali, and they had gotten rid of all the troops, went back to their city, and they took off all their jewels and their gold and this, and they gave it to Upali. They said, here, this will be enough for you to live on, and you can go back. And they were going to go on to the Buddha and get ordained. So Upali starts to go back to the city, and then he realizes, wow, the Sakyans, they're pretty temperamental. They might decide that this is my fault, or I took these jewels or something. They could kill me for this. So he turned around and went back to the six Sakyans who wanted to ordain, and he said, I want to ordain too. And so, but he didn't bring all the valuables with him. He hung them in a tree and wrote something about anyone who sees these can take them. So he told them what he did, and they said, that's a good idea. The Sakyans really are temperamental. You're right. You might die because of this. Come on with us. And they decide that when they get there, that they want Upali to be ordained first, because they said, we Sakyans are very proud people. And this Upali's been serving us for many years. And if he gets ordained first, then we'll always bow to him. We'll rise up for him. We'll pay respects to him. And this is good for us. So Devadatta is part of this group. They have the right ideas. They want to be humble. They want to be kind. They want to give their life to the training. And so, already they're starting to develop their Dhamma eye, seeing this situation and doing something to develop and let go of their attachments, their sense of pride. And so Devadatta is also humble. And in the Vinaya, it says during the first rains retreat, the one that was happening almost right away, Ananda became a stream enterer. Anuruddha developed clairvoyance. Bhadia had the three great insights. And Devadatta developed psychic powers. So they were all kind of having a lot happen. That's a pretty good rains retreat. I don't think mine is going to be quite that level, but it was a lot going on. And but as time went on, Devadatta wanted more. And he started thinking, who can I inspire in such a way that I will get a lot of material support and power? And he sees the Prince Ajatasattu. So this is the Prince of Magadha, big, powerful kingdom. He's the son of the king Bimbisara, a good king. And he sees that he's young and he's got a lot of potential. And if he inspires Ajatasattu, then he'll be really well supported. And he did it through his psychic powers. Actually turned himself, did some shape shifting, and made himself into a boy with a belt of snakes, and appeared in the lap of Ajatasattu. And Ajatasattu is freaked out, of course. I know it all sounds pretty fantastical, but you have psychic powers at that level. And then he reappeared as himself in his robes with his bowl in front of Ajatasattu. And so by that psychic power demonstration, Ajatasattu is completely bought in. But Devadatta has some really, really unwholesome ideas. He convinces Ajatasattu to kill his father, the king, so he could take over. And he said, I'll kill the Buddha and then I'll lead the Sangha. And it says in the Vinaya that with that thought, Devadatta lost his psychic powers. So there's a bunch of things that happen. He tries to send men to kill the Buddha, but they all are inspired by the Buddha and actually become stream enters on the spot. And so that doesn't work out. So he's like, okay, I'm just going to do it myself. He tries a couple of different ways to kill the Buddha, and he can't do it. I mean, he tries and it doesn't work out. The Buddha said that the Buddha could never die by violence. So it won't happen. And the Buddha used his loving kindness for all of these circumstances that happened. So this is also seeing with the Dhamma eye, obviously, to be able to face threat and danger from that place of a heart full of loving kindness. And then the Buddha, like, what do you do when you have someone, this is supposedly one of his disciples? How do you deal with a situation where this person has really become filled with greed and hatred, ambition? And the Buddha makes a legal process within the Vinaya, within the Sangha, to have an announcement made in the city of Rajagaha saying that Devadatta's character has changed and he shouldn't be trusted. He's no longer associated with the Buddha or whatever he does now. And this happened even before Devadatta tried to kill the Buddha, so that the people would know. And I found that interesting because it's like, what do you do when there's this corruption or danger? And the Buddha didn't do anything to harm Devadatta, but it was important to let people know. So sometimes we struggle in the practice with knowing how to deal with these things that are wrong in the world. How do you do that from seeing with the Dhamma eye? And the Sangha made this formal declaration. They sort of voted on it, and they made this determination of how this would be done. And the Buddha said to Sariputta, you're the one who should go out and make this declaration. And Sariputta said, but how can I? I have praised Devadatta to the people of Rajagaha, saying how powerful he is. And the Buddha said, when you said that, was it true? And he said, yes. He said, well, now this is what's true, and you need to say this. And so again, the Sangha voted who should go, and it was Sariputta who went and told the people. So one of the, it's good to remember that it's important to have that warning if people are being untrustworthy, dishonest, dangerous. It's not like we just like everything's okay. We're the kind, compassionate, easygoing group. We have to know what's wholesome and unwholesome. And this is part of training our inner eye, our inner sight. And it's also like we have to take action in the world accordingly. So there was a point, I won't give you all the details of the story, all it's fascinating, but there was a point where now Devadatta really wanted to break the Sangha apart, cause a schism. And he devises this plan, and he talks to his little group of guys who are following him. And he says, what we're going to do is we're going to take these 5 points to the Buddha. And the 5 points were, Devadatta wanted to have rules installed in the monastic Sangha that everyone should live in the wilderness and not in areas that are inhabited. If they live in areas that are inhabited, they've committed an offense. So always living in the wilderness, always wearing rag robes, always eating only the alms food you collect out of bowls and not accepting invitations to meals, always sleeping under a tree and not having shelter. Those are the first 4 ascetic practices that the Buddha allowed part of the time, but didn't require of people, of monastics. And the 5th one was vegetarianism, that they don't eat any meat or fish. And he said, we'll present these to the Buddha and he won't accept it. But the people will think we're better because we are doing all these ascetic practices. And then why did he pick vegetarianism? You know, you have to think, well, my experience as a vegetarian for 25 years is that issue is very emotional. People on one side or the other have very strong feelings about what we eat. And it's understandable, it's such a personal choice. But you can, if you ever have engaged in conversations about this where people have different views, you can see it's just really close to the bone in terms of, you know, like how we feel about it. So David Datta didn't care about animals or what, you know, what was healthy for people or any of that. He wasn't doing it for any of that. He was doing it solely to gain power and control and wealth. And we see the same kind of thing happening today in our world, especially in the United States right now. Choose an issue that's really got a lot of emotion behind it, complex. If you legislate, if you try to make laws about what's the right thing, you're going to harm people because there's not one size fits all. One way works for every situation. People get really emotionally caught up and we don't see with a Dhamma eye. And then, you know, so he's using this ploy. Of course, in the end, he was able to get some support, but it didn't really work. And that's also something to recognize. With the Dhamma eye, we have patience. You know, we look at what's wholesome and unwholesome. We stand up for what's good, do the right thing, and follow the ways of the examples of like the Buddha, for example, really wise, wholesome, uplifting examples, and learn, like, how do we deal with the complexities, with the nuances, with the threats. And it's the same with our body. You know, all kinds of things can be happening in the body. How do we learn from it? How do we see it as this system that's working outside of our control? It's not us. Or how do we deal with other living beings? Like I had this wolf spider living in my bathroom. And it was interesting. Like I watched it for at least a couple of weeks. It was living in the corner by the cabinet and the wall, and there was a little crack there. Every time anything I did kind of startled it, it would run into that crack. Well, usually I collect a spider and take it outside gently and let it go. But this spider was too fast and too scared. And even though once I was able to kind of block off the crack, it just panicked. This poor spider just panicked. And in the process, what I was using to block it moved and it got into its little crack. And I'm like, okay. So I go in and every time I go into the bathroom, I check, yep, spiders there in the corner. I'm just gonna leave it alone. I mean, wolf spiders look kind of scary, but they're really harmless. And I think, okay, how would I see this if it weren't a harmless spider? Hopefully the same way. And then he ventured out a little more. One day I spoke out loud to him and I said, "So you've come out a little bit. You know, I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to take you outside. I'm a little concerned you're not really getting much to eat there. I want you to be okay." And it was kind of funny because I just felt this surge of metta. And I thought, I didn't even realize how much was there. And then I went to wash my hands. And when I finished, I looked back down at the spider, and the spider was gone. And he wasn't in the crack. I could tell. It's like, hmm. So I looked around a little bit, didn't see him anywhere. Okay. Every time I went in, I'd look, nope, spider's not there. And then I saw him on the other side of the room, calm. I'm like, okay, are you ready to go outside? It was pretty easy to just guide him into my little spider catching apparatus. And I brought him outside. He disappeared in the crack of the deck and down into what I'm pretty sure is a spider paradise, lots of options. And I really wonder, it's like you get the sense sometimes that living beings, they really do feel that metta when it's there. Of course, there are a lot of stories too in the suttas and the Vinaya of the Buddha encouraging the monks to practice metta when they're out in the wild. Ajahn Yanako told us some stories of the mountain lions and bears and other critters that he's encountered, and he said he never has trouble if he does his chanting. Never has any problem. And so it's like, okay, some of this stuff is mysterious. We don't really know how it works, but we do know what's right. And if we are feeling that sense of peace in the heart and kindness, wisdom is there, we know we're on the right track. And if we feel tight and anxious, afraid, and maybe full of desire of some kind, then we know we've got something to learn from. It's dukkha. And when we can look at that with the Dhamma eye, we're not harsh with ourselves. We're not harsh with others. And it's actually a very inspiring practice because we can really see the development. And it kind of brings me back to Ajahn Kalyano after 20 years. I was really impressed when I visited the first time, but now I just see so much more there. That kindness, that wisdom developing over time, practicing. So that's all I'm going to say. I hope it made sense. and I'd like to hear any questions or examples or comments you have. Okay. Thank you, Steve. Any thoughts? Anne?
Well, I just found it very interesting and applicable in the context of living in community as we are now. And there was an incident of a resident who did something that other people were really upset about. And it's just interesting to see the reactions, including my own, and to really see somebody as other and not feel compassion. And so in that particular context of feeling compassion for others who are acting out, one might say acting out their needs and wants and insistence that have to be things their way. I mean, that's really what can happen here. Things have to be their way. So for me, staying with a kind heart, I think that hits the nail on the head, whether it's spiders or annoying people. But so I really understand, and seeing through the Dharma eye, that's sort of what this Saturday morning is titled, right? Not quite the same, but
Yeah.
It's where the rubber hits the road. And so yeah, I appreciate your talk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's such a important development in our practice to see clearly what's happening and not condone bad behavior and not let it slide either, but also to be compassionate. And the Buddha was very strong in some of his statements, like, announcing to the public to beware of Devadatta. At one point, Devadatta, in front of the king, in front of a lot of people, asked the Buddha to just turn the Sangha over to him. And the Buddha was silent. And then Devadatta asked again and again, the 3 times that usually ended. And the Buddha finally said, I wouldn't even turn it over to Sariputta and Moggallana. The least of all to you, who's the, and it isn't, I can't remember how it's translated, but it's like one who eats spittle. It's like someone who's after the material things and is just eating, just taking in the junk. Fighting for junk. This is what Ajahn Ganha says about, when people are fighting, he said if in the name of religion people are fighting, they're totally not aligned with religion. Obviously, we know that. And he said when people are fighting, they're just fighting for junk. They're just fighting for these material things. Of course, they're also fighting for power. But the Buddha is trying to tell Devadatta, you're looking for the wrong things. No, I'm not going to turn the Sangha over to you. So it's like, how do we handle that when it's someone that we're living in community with? We have to look at whether or not we have the permission to talk to them, whether or not we have the proper authority. So the Buddha had the authority. Devadatta was actually a disciple. I always was amazed that the Buddha didn't just kick him out of the Sangha. Like why? I think as long as, for a long time, if Devadatta would have changed his direction, he could have been rehabilitated. But it's like, it's interesting and important. And Ajahn Ganha says wisdom solves the problem. But that's what he's talking about. We train the Dhamma eye, seeing with the Dhamma, and then in the situation, especially if we've cultivated our intuition, then with reflection, we'll have an idea of how to respond. I think this is really the right path.
Yeah.
Kind of sorting out all of our own defilements out of the picture.
And sort of finding a place where I can be helpful is what it is for me in some of these in the situation, this one particular incident. And I was able to use some of my skills from a previous working experience to say, we need some structure around this, and it needs to go to management, and just help people to see a way around it. So
yeah, and that's exactly what the Buddha did. He created the monastic form. There was structure. He didn't tell Sariputta to go out and just, say this to the people of Rajagaha. He brought about rules around how you do this, and the Sangha did it as a formal declaration, and it was a legal procedure. Whereas you would think, well, the Buddha has the power, he can say, do this, do that. But he was developing a community that could actually operate 2,500 years later, like we are. Like we need to have ways of working with these kinds of situations that are fair, where we don't have to respond from a place of anger or this strong energy or force, but actually that there's a protocol here that we can use, and we may need to adjust it. The Buddha did that a lot. He put a rule in place, and then there'd be some circumstance where the rule didn't work, wasn't fair, didn't have the right result, and then he would adjust the rule. And this is also something we need to look at. Instead of having laws in this country that have so many circumstances where people are really harmed, we need to readjust those laws or eliminate those laws, those ones that really foster discrimination and oppression. So, we can't do this by ourselves, obviously. We have to, like you said, and we look at how can we be helpful. We need to look at, well, what do I have? What is my responsibility? To vote for people who are looking at it in a way that comes from caring rather than from just wanting power. So this is like, if a person really wants to serve a community, really wants to serve their country, really wants to help people in general, then you try to support them to have the means to do that. We all live in the world. We need to operate and practice and learn from our life in the world and from every aspect of it.
I mean, I'm just feeling how profound it is, how profound the teachings are, and how fortunate that they're available. And it's very touching. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Anne. Holly?
How do you think the idea of the Dhamma eye is similar to what one might be when they are going into insight meditation?
Well, insight meditation, I mean, if we leave alone what we might think of as the technical definition of insight meditation, and we just talk about developing insight, or even if we look at, well, what do people mean by insight meditation, a lot of times it's like you're working with vipassana, you're maybe using a Goenka kind of style, or we're looking at sort of American Buddhism and what they mean by insight meditation. But if you come back to what the Buddha taught, you've got samatha and vipassana working together. So as you're meditating, you're observing, And then, if we're observing with the Dhamma eye, we're evaluating wholesome and unwholesome. And we're making the decisions or determinations, or we're guiding ourselves towards the wholesome and leaving away the unwholesome. But people have different ideas about what insight meditation is. So if insight meditation just means you watch it and you don't make any distinctions about what you're experiencing, what's entering and what's passing through, that wouldn't really be seeing with the Dhamma eye. You might just be looking with your views and opinions. And our views and opinions are also things that we need to observe with some distance on it. How do I need to change my views in order to be in alignment with Dhamma? How can we see them? So I would say the relationship is, whatever kind of meditation we're doing, we should be incorporating wisdom into it. That we're really seeing according to Dhamma and training ourselves to see according to Dhamma instead of according to the sense of self. Does that answer
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yes. When I do have a meditation where I get quiet and still, and I do have an attitude of seeing what might arise to consider, I feel like that idea of a Dhamma eye is relevant, like I'm truly seeing what's there.
Yeah.
And it's a nice.
Good. Yes. Seeing what's there in the context of, impermanence, dukkha, and not self, in the context of the Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah. Joni?
Yes, thank you for the teaching. This discernment of wholesome versus unwholesome, or wise versus unwise, brings me back to how difficult it is to be really, truly honest with myself. And it takes a lot of discernment to do that. It's sort of a constant, interplay of, is this really true? Is this skillful? Is this wholesome? But sort of that. But I also find it very useful to have that sort of in the background of my awareness of, reflecting on that and asking that question. Not only is it true, but is it 100% true? But that practice, the discernment practice of, like, I keep coming back, I guess, to that phrase of just being able to be discerning enough to be truly honest. Myself with
that,
my.
Yeah, that honesty is so crucial. I mean, we really have to put that honesty above anything we cling to, anything that we think we are or think we should be, or anything. We've got to put that honesty first. We have to be incredibly honest with ourselves about what we're up to, what's going on, and be willing to let go of anything that needs to be let go of, so that we can develop, so that we can change, so that we become free and at ease and happy and aligned with Dhamma. When we're aligned with Dhamma and we really can see that, we've cultivated and developed the Dhamma eye, the inner view of Dhamma, then we are at ease. We don't have to be, when any kind of dukkha arises, suffering arises, discontent or that feeling that something's not quite right, we can step back and look at that. Okay, what am I clinging to? What am I wanting here? What am I wanting to get rid of? And then we can let it go. It's like, but that has to be our highest priority, not to maintain this sense of self that we've built up over these years. That is not worth it. It is not reliable. And then when you see practitioners change and you see them develop and you see this beautiful softness, but strength also come about, it's so inspiring. And when we look over our own history, like where I was before, and now what am I doing? That is also inspiring. We can allow ourselves to be inspired by this path. Because it's because of the path. Like Anne was saying, you know, we're so fortunate to have these teachings available. And when I started talking, I was talking about how usually opening the Dhamma eyes about stream entry, and Ajahn Kalyano, I don't believe even mentioned that. I liked the way he approached this, because when we think, oh, I want to be a stream enterer, you know, there's that goal-oriented attitude. We're so given to that in our culture, you know, to have a goal and try to strive for it and try to figure out, you know, sometimes people are trying to figure out, like, what does it take to be a stream enterer, and how do I put this piece in place and that piece in place? And it doesn't work that way in cultivating the mind. But this way of, like, how can I see through the eye of Dhamma? This works, and it helps the mind to cultivate to a point where there isn't any desire to get something or to get rid of something, where there really is peace developing in the heart, kindness and compassion, etc., all developing in the heart. This is really the way to cultivation. And when we find ourselves being goal-oriented, to really see that for what it is, see that with the eye of Dhamma, and the stress that comes with it, trying too hard, comparing ourselves to others, all of those things as obstacles that we can overcome, that we can learn from and let go of. Carol?
Okay, just have to unmute. I'll be brief. I know we're getting. I just want to say, when I heard you say, like, seeing with the eye of Dhamma, I didn't associate it with stream entry.
Yeah.
To me, it was. I know I've said this before, that, you know, for me, the precepts are part of me. They've become me. Mm-hmm. To me, seeing with the eye of Dhamma is when you take the Dhamma into you, and it becomes you, and you're actually looking out onto the world with that. That was my impression. Like, I didn't think of stream entry, but it's really hard to take that Dhamma into you, because there are parts of you that want those things, or that, you know, so yeah. Anyway, that was just my impression of that term, you know, seeing with the eye of Dhamma. So that's all, you know, that's all.
Thank you, Carol.
I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time together. Thank you all for your practice and efforts and comments.